The plasma cannon melted through Admiral Vex Morton's flagship bridge like butter through steel, vaporizing 3 officers where they stood, through the smoke and screaming. Morton watched his fleet, humanity's last defense, crumble under an impossible assault. The enemy's ships moved with surgical precision, anticipating every tactical maneuver before his captains could execute them. "How are they doing this?" Captain Raina Voss shouted over the klaxons, her scarred face illuminated by the hellish glow of dying ships on the tactical display. Morton knew, deep in his gut, he knew exactly how the hegemony forces were reading them like an open book. The answer made his blood run cold. "It's Kefvirian," he whispered. Then louder, "It's the goddamn scout. 6 months ago, the galactic hegemony had sent an infiltrator to study humanity's military capabilities. Not unusual, every species did reconnaissance. What was unusual was that the scout, designated Kefvirian, had been captured within days by human intelligence. Standard protocol was interrogation, execution, or prisoner exchange. Instead, Director Cassius Wren had proposed something different, something that would haunt humanity forever. "We don't just capture their scout," Wren had argued before the War Council. "We convert it. We show it who we really are. Make it understand that humanity isn't the barbaric species the hegemony believes. We turn their spy into our advocate." Morton had opposed the plan. "You're playing with fire, Wren. These beings aren't human. You can't predict how they'll react." But Wren was persuasive, and the Council was desperate for any advantage. The war had been going badly. Humanity was outgunned, outnumbered, and running out of colonies to lose. Kefvirian had been given unprecedented access to human culture, history, and military doctrine. It attended universities, lived in civilian communities, observed human art and philosophy. The plan was to demonstrate humanity's nobility, their capacity for growth and cooperation. For 5 months, it seemed to work. Kefvirian appeared fascinated by human complexity, their simultaneous capacity for great kindness and terrible violence. It studied everything: Shakespeare and genocide records, humanitarian missions and nuclear warfare, children's laughter and prisoner interrogations. Then one morning, Kefvirian was gone. Security footage showed it walking calmly out of its residence, past guards who somehow never saw it leave. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the scout was already aboard a stealth craft, broadcasting human military secrets across subspace frequencies. But that wasn't the worst part. Within days, hegemony propaganda networks were flooded with detailed exposures of humanity's darkest moments: the Holocaust, the slave trade, Uni 731, Rwanda, countless atrocities spanning millennia. Kefvirian didn't lie, it simply selected the most damning truths and presented them with surgical precision. "This is what humanity calls civilization." The scout's voice echoed across the galaxy. "They showed me their art while explaining how they perfected industrial murder. They spoke of peace while demonstrating weapons designed to maximize suffering. I have seen their true nature, and I understand why the galaxy must be protected from this species, the hegemony's war against humanity, transformed from a territorial dispute into a moral crusade. Species that had remained neutral now pledged fleets to the cause. Humanity wasn't just facing an enemy, they were facing an entire galaxy convinced of their evil. "Admiral," Lieutenant Korvac's voice cracked with terror, "the hegemony flagship is hailing us." On the main screen, Kefvirian appeared. The being that had once seemed curious and thoughtful now radiated cold fury. Its elongated form was encased in hegemony battle armor, and its multifaceted eyes held no trace of the gentle observer it had pretended to be. "Admiral Morton," Kefvirian's translator rendered its words in perfect, accentless English. "I know you opposed Director Wren's plan. You understood the danger better than your colleagues. For that wisdom, I offer you this single chance. Surrender your fleet, and I will ensure your crews receive quick deaths." Morton felt his bridge crew's eyes on him. Young faces, old faces, all united in desperate determination. They knew what surrender meant for humanity: not just death, but extinction, with their species remembered only as monsters. "Counteroffer," Morton replied, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "Go to hell." Kefvirian's alien features twisted into something resembling a smile. "I expected nothing less from your kind. Very well. Today, the galaxy witnesses the end of humanity's threat. Attack formations execute order vindication." The hegemony fleet moved with inhuman coordination, each ship perfectly positioned to exploit weaknesses in human formations. that HFY had learned during his months of study. As the first human vessels began to die, Morton realized they weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting to prove they deserved to exist at all. The battle erupted with the fury of a dying star. Morton's flagship, the UES Defiance, shuddered under the opening volley as crimson energy beams carved through its forward armor. Around them, the human fleet of 43 vessels faced off against nearly 200 hegemony ship's odds. That would have been insurmountable even without a traitor reading their every move. All ships. Pattern Delta 7, Morton barked into his calm. Execute scatter formation. But even as his captains began to maneuver, HFY's forces were already repositioning to intercept. The scout knew Pattern Delta 7. It knew all their patterns, sir. They're moving to cut off our escape vectors, Captain Voss reported, her hands flying over tactical controls. They know exactly where we're going. The heavy cruiser Retribution erupted in flame as 3 hegemony destroyers focused fire on its engines. Morton watched helplessly as Captain Drell's crew died, good people he'd known for years. Reduced to expanding gas and metal fragments, Rambler's squadron break left and engage those destroyers. Commander Nash's voice crackled through the calm. From the carrier Sovereign, cover the Retribution's escape pods. The human fighters swarmed out like angry hornets, their smaller size allowing them to dance between the massive capital ships. Lieutenant Yuki Sato's fighter dove under a hegemony cruiser's guns, her particle cannon stitching damage across its hull. For a moment, Morton felt hope their pilots were still superior in individual skill. Then HFY's voice cut through the battle chatter. All units, implement Anti-Fighter Protocol 7. Humans favor individual heroics over coordinated tactics. The hegemony ships shifted their formation, creating overlapping fields of defensive fire. Sato's fighter, caught in a crossfire meant specifically for humanity's aggressive flying style, disintegrated in a ball of plasma. 12 more human fighters died in the next 30 seconds. As the aliens exploited psychological patterns the scout had studied for months. They're inside our heads, Voss. Morton's jaw clenched. That we get out of our heads. All ships, abandon standard formations. Captain's discretion, no patterns, no protocols. Make it up as you go. It was military heresy, throwing away decades of tactical doctrine, but desperation bred innovation. Captain Torres of the destroyer Vengeance suddenly accelerated straight at a hegemony dreadnought, firing everything while screaming an old Spanish war cry. The aliens, expecting calculated human tactics, were caught off guard as Torres rammed his ship into their launch bays. The explosion took out 3 enemy fighters and crippled the dreadnought's port side. As Torres died, he gave humanity its first kill of the battle. That's how we do it, shouted Commander Price from the battleship entrance. Random madness, make the bastards guess. But HFY adapted quickly. Its voice echoed across all frequencies. Observe how they resort to chaos when order fails them. This confirms what I learned: humans are fundamentally unstable. All units maintain discipline. Their desperation makes them predictable, and it was true. As human ships began wild, uncoordinated attacks, the hegemony forces simply waited, letting humanity's rage carry them into carefully prepared kill zones. The frigate Courage died trying to outflank an alien battle group. The cruiser Indomitable was caught between the dreadnoughts and pounded to scrap. Morton watched his fleet die ship by ship, each death a personal failure. 28 vessels remained, facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every desperate gambit. Admiral, Communications Officer Valdez reported, we're receiving surrender demands from 17 different hegemony ships. They're offering to cut the channel. Morton snapped, we don't negotiate with species traitors. Through the smoke and flame, HFY's image appeared again on the main screen. The scout's alien features showed what might have been satisfaction or perhaps disappointment. Admiral, your tactical creativity is admirable, but futile. I have observed human military doctrine from its classical origins through modern innovations. Your species excels at adaptation, but adaptation requires time you no longer possess. You think you know us. Morton stood, his voice carrying across the bridge. You spent 5 months in our libraries and classrooms. I've spent 50 years bleeding with these people. You learned our history, I lived it. HFY's multifaceted eyes seemed to focus directly on him. I learned enough. I saw your files on the Sino-American War, the European purges, the Mars Colony Massacre. Your people excel at killing each other. Today, we simply give you worthier opponents. The truth of it hit Morton like a physical blow. Humanity's gift for violence, their talent for finding new ways to destroy enemies, was being used against them by someone who had studied their darkest capabilities with cold, analytical precision. All ships, Morton said quietly into his calm, prepare for close engagement. We're going to show this alien what humans are really like when you back us into a corner. The remaining human vessels began to converge, abandoning all pretense of tactical sophistication. If HFY wanted to see human nature at its rawest, they would oblige, but as the two fleets closed for knife fighting range, Morton wondered if they were walking into exactly the trap the scout wanted, proving once and for all that humanity deserved extinction. The battle devolved into a savage melee as human ships closed with their hegemony counterparts. At knife fighting range, HFY's tactical advantages meant less. There was no room for complex maneuvers, only brutal, grinding combat where human desperation could match alien precision. The heavy cruiser Macedonia, commanded by Captain Elena Varga, grappled magnetically with a hegemony battleship twice its size. If we're going down, we're taking you with us, Varga screamed as her crew manually overloaded their reactor cores. The explosion took both ships, along with two smaller hegemony escorts caught in the blast radius. But for every victory, humanity paid a terrible price. The destroyer Phoenix died ramming an alien carrier, its crew of 300 sacrificing themselves to cripple the enemy's fighter operations. Admiral, Lieutenant Korvik shouted over the din of battle damage alarms. Long-range sensors are picking up massive reinforcements. Hegemony's 7th Fleet is 2 hours out, over 500 ships. The news hit Morton's bridge crew like a physical blow. They were already outnumbered for 2-1. When the reinforcements arrived, it would be suicide. Sir, Captain Voss said quietly, recommend we begin evacuation protocols. Get the civilians off the outer colonies while we can still. No. Morton's voice cut through the bridge chatter like a blade. We don't run. We don't abandon our people to become examples of human barbarism for the galaxy to witness. On the tactical display, more human ships winked out of existence. The carrier Sovereign, its launch bays gutted by concentrated fire, listed helplessly as its escorts tried to screen it from further attack. Commander Nash's voice crackled through damaged communications. Defiance. This is Nash. My ship's finished. Requesting permission to ram the Hegemony command ship. Denied. Nash, we need every gun fighting. With respect, Admiral, my guns are already gone. Let me do something useful with what's left. Morton closed his eyes. Another friend, another death he'd have to carry. Permission. The Sovereign's engines flared as Nash pushed his dying ship toward HFY's flagship. The alien formation tried to intercept, but Nash had been flying combat missions since before some of these alien captains were spawned. His carrier weaved through the defensive fire with the skill of a master pilot. At the last second, HFY's flagship fired everything it had. The Sovereign's hull cracked open like an egg, spilling atmosphere and bodies into the void. But Nash's ship had built up too much momentum to stop. The carrier struck the Hegemony flagship's starboard side with the force of a kinetic meteor. For a moment, Morton thought they'd killed the scout. The flagship reeled from the impact, its lights flickering as internal explosions rocked its hull. Then, slowly, emergency power restored its systems, and HFY's image appeared again, this time with what looked like admiration. It is alien features. Impressive, Admiral. Your commander Nash's sacrifice damaged my ship significantly. Such tactical flexibility using a crippled vessel as a kinetic weapon demonstrates the adaptability I observed in your species. Unfortunately, it also demonstrates your willingness to waste lives for minimal strategic gain. That wasn't waste, Morton snarled. That was courage, something your species apparently can't understand. Courage, HFY's translator rendered something that might have been laughter. I spent months studying your concept of courage, Admiral. I read your Medal of Honor citations, your Victoria Cross records, your stories of heroic sacrifice. Do you know what I concluded? The scout's image leaned forward, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the dying light of burning ships. Human courage is indistinguishable from human stupidity. Your greatest heroes are inevitably those who died for causes that could have been achieved through negotiation or strategic retreat. You glorify waste, call it noble, and use it to justify the next generation's sacrifices. Around them, the battle raged on. 16 human ships remained, facing over 100 alien vessels. The math was simple. They would all be dead within the hour. You want to know what I learned about humanity? Kevirian continued. Your apex predator is trapped in a civilized shell. Your art, your philosophy, your music, it's all just sophisticated packaging for a species that solves problems through violence. Even your children's stories celebrate conflict and domination, maybe, Morton admitted, watching another human ship die on his screens. But we also learn to dream of better things. When did your species last write poetry about hope for the first time? Kevirian seemed genuinely surprised by the question. Its alien features shifted in what might have been confusion. Poetry is irrelevant to survival. No, Morton said, his voice carrying across the open channel to every human ship in the battle. Poetry is what makes survival worthwhile. Every human out here dying today knows poems about home, songs about love, stories about heroes who saved the people they cared about. What do your people know, Scout? What makes your existence matter beyond simple continuation? The question hung in space between them while human and alien ships continued their deadly dance. Several hegemony vessels seemed to hesitate, their rate of fire decreasing slightly. Kevirian's response, when it came, carried a new edge of anger. Sentiment will not save your species, Admiral. All ships, press the attack, show no mercy. To these animals masquerading as philosophers. But something had changed. Morton could hear it in the alien communications chatter. Doubt, questions, confusion where there had been only certainty before. The Scout had made a mistake. In trying to prove humanity's brutality, it had accidentally revealed something else entirely, that even facing extinction, humans were still arguing about what made life worth living. And across the hegemony fleet, alien minds that had never considered such questions were beginning to wonder. The doubt spreading through the hegemony fleet lasted exactly 97 seconds before Kevirian crushed it with ruthless efficiency. All units, implement Psychological Warfare Protocol 9. The Scout's voice cut through the alien communications. Display human atrocity records on all civilian frequencies. Remind our allies why this species must be eliminated. Across the galaxy, every civilian communication network suddenly filled with humanity's darkest moments. Concentration camps, mass graves, chemical weapons deployed against civilian populations, children used as soldiers. Each image was accompanied by Kevirian's commentary, dissecting the methodical nature of human cruelty. The effect was immediate. Any hesitation in the hegemony fleet vanished as alien crews remembered why they were fighting. But Morton saw something else in the tactical data. The Scout was afraid. Afraid enough to resort to propaganda in the middle of a battle it was already winning. All ships. Morton transmitted, implement Directive Omega Black. Captain Voss turned to stare at him. Sir, that's war crimes legislation, I know. Morton's face was grim. But we're about to be extinct. Laws written by the living don't apply to the dead. Directive Omega Black was humanity's ultimate contingency. The complete abandonment of civilized warfare. No more rules about targeting. No more protections for surrendering enemies. No more distinction between military and civilian targets. It was everything the galaxy accused humans of being, concentrated into pure tactical doctrine. The frigate Wolverine, its conventional weapons exhausted, released its entire complement of nuclear mines into a cluster of hegemony escorts. The alien ships, designed for civilized warfare, had no defense against weapons that had been banned for 3 centuries. 7 vessels disintegrated in atomic fire. The destroyer Hammerfall activated its experimental bioweapons, flooding nearby. Alien ships with engineered viruses that targeted their specific physiologies. The screams that came across the communications channels were unlike anything the human crews had ever heard. Captain Zhao of the cruiser Retribution began firing on alien escape pods, something no human military had done since the war crimes. Tribunal of 2387, her voice, transmitted on all frequencies, was steady and cold. No prisoners, no survivors. You want to see monsters? Here we are. For the first time since the battle began, the hegemony formation wavered. They had expected desperate human tactics, but not this systematic embrace of everything they claimed to oppose. Admiral, Kevirian, order your ships to cease these violations of galactic law immediately. Law? Morton laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You're exterminating our entire species. You want to talk about law? There is no law here, Scout. There's only survival. The human counterattack was as brutal as it was effective. 12 human ships, freed from the constraints of civilized warfare, carved through 30 alien vessels in 15 minutes. They used every dirty trick developed during humanity's bloody history of false surrender signals, followed by point-blank nuclear strikes, hacking alien communication networks to broadcast contradictory orders, targeting life support systems to force enemy crews to choose between suffocation and abandoning their posts. But the cost was horrific. The bioweapons deployed by Hammerfall began spreading beyond their intended targets, carried by debris and atmosphere leaks to human ships. Captain Chen of the Corvette Defiant watched her crew begin dying as alien viruses mutated and found new hosts. Her last transmission was a warning. Biocontainment failed. We're all infected. Tell my family. Tell them we fought as humans. The tactical shift had given humanity a brief advantage, but at the price of becoming everything their enemies claimed they were. Worse. HFY was recording everything. Observe. The scout transmitted across all civilian frequencies. How quickly they abandoned their pretense of civilization. This is what I learned during my time among them. Humans are always one crisis away from reverting to savagery. They spoke to me of evolution and progress while maintaining weapons designed solely for genocide. The propaganda was devastatingly effective across the galaxy. Species that had been wavering in their support for the war now solidified behind the hegemony cause. Real-time footage of human ships using banned weapons, targeting escape pods, and deploying bioweapons provided irrefutable proof of humanity's monstrous nature. Sir, Lieutenant Korvac reported, his voice barely steady. Long-range communications are picking up mobilization orders from the Galactic Council. They're authorizing a full extermination fleet. Over 3,000 ships. 3,000 ships. The number was beyond comprehension. Even if humanity won this battle, it seemed impossible. They would face an armada that could sterilize every human world in the galaxy. All ships, Morton transmitted, his voice carrying across the dwindling human fleet. Prepare for final engagement. We're down to 8 vessels against 93 alien ships, with massive reinforcements inbound. Anyone who wants to surrender and face individual execution rather than species extinct. I won't think less of you. The response came back immediately from 7 captains, their voices overlapping in fierce determination. Negative, Admiral. We're with you to the end. As the human survivors prepared for their last stand, HFY's image appeared one final time on the main screen. The scout's alien features showed what might have been genuine regret. Admiral Morton, I want you to understand I did not hate your species when I arrived. I was genuinely curious about human nature, but what I discovered terrified me. You have the potential for greatness, but you invariably choose destruction. You could have been partners in galactic civilization, but you remain predators wearing the mask of sapience. Maybe, Morton replied, watching his tactical display as the remaining human ships formed their final battle line. But we're predators who dream, scout, and sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is a dreamer with nothing left to lose. The hegemony fleet began its final advance, confident in their overwhelming numbers. But in the depths of space, 8 human ships prepared to show the galaxy exactly what kind of monsters they could become when their species' survival was at stake. The final battle began with the light of 1,000 suns. As every weapon in both fleets fired simultaneously, the human ships, abandoned to desperation, had clustered into a tight defensive formation around the crippled battleship Endurance, using its massive bulk as cover while they unleashed everything. They had Admiral Morton's flagship Defiance led the charge, its forward batteries hammering the hegemony vanguard with depleted uranium rounds that punched through alien shields like paper. Around them, the 7 remaining human vessels fought with the fury of cornered animals. Captain Varga, commanding the wounded cruiser Macedonia, had welded herself into the gunnery station after taking shrapnel in both legs. Her voice rang across the battle channel as she directed fire. Target their power cores. Make every shot count. We don't get second chances. The destroyer Wolverine, its hull breached in a dozen places, continued fighting even as atmosphere streamed from its wounds. Captain Torres, Elena's younger brother, seeking vengeance for his sister's death, rammed his ship directly into a hegemony battle cruiser, both vessels disappearing in a ball of nuclear fire that temporarily blinded every sensor in the engagement zone. That's 11 alien ships down, Lieutenant Korvac shouted over the din of combat. But sir, we're taking massive casualties. The human formation was indeed paying a terrible price. The frigate Stormcrow had lost its entire port side to concentrated plasma fire, its crew working frantically to keep the reactor from overloading. The Corvette Havoc, smallest ship in the fleet, danced between alien dreadnoughts like a minnow among sharks, its pilot performing impossible maneuvers while her gunner scored hit after hit on larger targets. But for every alien ship that died, humanity lost irreplaceable people. Commander Sarazu, leading the fighter squadron from the damaged carrier Victory, watched her pilots die one by one as they threw themselves against impossible odds. Red 7 is gone. Blue Squadron, form up on me, we're making one last run. On their flagship, Kethverian's command ship, though damaged by Nash's earlier ramming attack, remained the nerve center of the alien fleet. Its point defense systems were formidable. Wazoo's fighters were beyond caring about survival. They dove through the defensive fire like meteors, several crashing directly into the alien vessel's bridge tower. Direct hit, Voss reported. Their command ship is listing we might have gotten Kethverian. But the scout's voice crackled through damaged communications moments later. Now carrying traces of pain. Impressive tactical sacrifice, Admiral. Your pilots died well. However, one ship does not constitute a fleet. He was right. Despite their desperate fury, the humans were being systematically eliminated. The cruiser Valiant, its crew reduced to 12 survivors, continued firing until an alien torpedo punched through its reactor shielding. The explosion lit up half the battlefield. 5 ships left, Morton said quietly, watching the tactical display update. Around them, 8 to 7 hegemony vessels closed in for the kill. Their formation perfect despite the casualties they'd suffered. The battleship Endurance, which had served as the human formation's anchor, suddenly lurched as its damaged engines finally failed. Captain Harrison's voice came across the comm, steady despite the sounds of explosions in the background. Admiral, we're dead in space. Reactors going critical, estimate for minutes. Until containment failure. Abandoned ship. Captain, negative. Sir, most of my crew's already gone, and the ones left. We've got a better idea. Harrison's voice carried grim satisfaction. We're going to make this count. The Endurance began to accelerate despite its failed engines, pushed by carefully controlled reactor overloads that would soon consume the ship entirely. But for now, the massive battleship was essentially a guided nuclear bomb, heading directly for the center of the hegemony formation. All alien ships, scatter formation immediately. Kethverian's voice carried new urgency. Do not engage the damaged battleship, but it was too late. The Endurance, its hull glowing white hot from internal explosions, plowed into a cluster of hegemony cruisers just as its reactor achieved critical mass. The detonation was visible from 3 star systems away, a miniature supernova that vaporized 28 alien vessels instantly and crippled a dozen more. 6 to 7 hostiles remaining. Korvik reported, his voice hollow with exhaustion and grief. For human ships operational. For ships, against 6 to 7. And in the distance, the first elements of the Galactic Council's extermination fleet were beginning to appear on long-range sensors. The frigate Stormcrow, its reactor finally giving out. When dark as Captain Wilson's crew desperately tried to restore power, the alien fleet immediately focused fire on the helpless vessel, reducing it to debris in seconds. Wilson's final transmission was barely audible through the static. Remember us, Admiral. Remember what we died for. 3 ships now, the Defiance, the Macedonia, and the tiny Corvette Havoc, still somehow dancing between alien battle lines despite having lost half its maneuvering thrusters. Admiral, Captain Varga transmitted from the Macedonia. My ship's finished. Engines gone. Weapons down to 10%. Life support failing. Sir, with respect, we're all dead anyway. Let me make it meaningful. Varga's cruiser began to list toward the alien formation, its emergency thrusters pushing it on what appeared to be an uncontrolled drift toward the enemy. Flagship, Kethverian's forces initially ignored the apparently helpless ship, focusing instead on the still dangerous Defiance. It was a fatal mistake. At point-blank range, Varga activated her ship's self-destruct sequence, but not before launching every nuclear torpedo in her magazines directly into the Scout's command vessel. The explosion took out both ships, along with Kethverian's secondary command staff, for several precious minutes. The hegemony fleet operated without central coordination, allowing the Defiance and Havoc to score several more kills against confused alien formations. But when the smoke cleared, 59 alien ships remain operational. And HFY's voice returned, now transmitted from a backup command vessel, carrying new notes of both admiration and implacable determination to human ships, too. And still you fight. I confess, Admiral, your species exceeds even my most pessimistic projections for destructive capability. When the galaxy asks why humanity had to be eliminated, I will point to this battle as proof. Morton looked around his bridge at the handful of survivors still manning their stations. Young faces, old faces, all marked by the terrible understanding that they were witnessing humanity's final moments. Any regrets? He asked quietly. Lieutenant Korvek, blood streaming from a head wound, managed a smile. About fighting? No, sir. About not fighting harder. On the tactical display, the Galactic Council's extermination fleet was moving into position, 3,000 ships arriving to finish what HFY had started. To human vessels against the entire galaxy, Morton keyed his final transmission to all frequencies, knowing it would be heard across civilized space. This is Admiral Vex Morton of the United Earth Space Command. We are the last of our kind, and we are not surrendering. Let the galaxy remember when you came to destroy us for being monsters. We showed you what monsters really look like when their children are threatened. The final assault began. The two remaining human ships faced impossible odds as 3,000 alien vessels moved into attack formation. The Defiance, its hull scarred by countless impacts, and the tiny corvette Havoc, somehow still operational despite having lost most of its systems, prepared for humanity's final stand. But across the galaxy, something unexpected was happening. On the hegemony homeworld, civilian populations watched the battlefields with growing unease. They had expected to witness the quick elimination of a savage species. Instead, they were watching beings who fought with desperate courage for their families, their homes, their very right to exist. On Proxima Station, a group of young hegemony officers questioned their orders for the first time in their lives. On the vegan trade routes, merchant captains began asking why an entire species had to die. Even within the extermination fleet itself, some alien crews wondered if they were witnessing valor or atrocity. HFY, monitoring these communications from the backup command ship, realized the danger immediately. All fleet commanders implement communication blackout protocols. No civilian feeds, no open channels, complete military encryption only. But it was too late. The image of two small human ships refusing to surrender against overwhelming odds had captured something in the galactic consciousness, something that transcended species boundaries. Admiral Morton, unaware of the larger implications, focused on the tactical situation. Korvek, what's our status? Main engines at 30%. Forward weapons offline. Life support failing. The young lieutenant's voice remained steady despite their desperate circumstances. Havoc reports similar damage. Captain Reeves says she's got maybe 10 minutes of maneuvering thrust left. 10 minutes, Morton mused, against 3,000 ships. Anyone want to calculate those odds? 0% survival probability, Korvek replied with grim humor. But we've been beating impossible odds all day. The first wave of the extermination fleet opened fire, hundreds of energy beams converging on the human position. But instead of the expected destruction, something unprecedented happened. A massive energy shield materialized around the human ships, absorbing the incoming fire. Through the tactical display, an unfamiliar voice transmitted on standard frequencies. Human vessels, this is Commander Thegmora of the independent hegemony frigate Conscience. We're here to even the odds. Morton stared in disbelief as his sensors detected new contacts. Dozens of hegemony's ships moving to defensive positions around the human survivors. More voices followed. This is Captain Zulvex of the heavy cruiser. Descent? My crew and I refuse to participate in genocide. Merchant vessel free trader standing by. We've got refugees from 12 different species on board, all of them saying this is wrong. Vegan Defense Force Squadron 7, we came to observe, but we can't watch this anymore. Within minutes, nearly 200 ships from various species had positioned themselves between the human survivors and the extermination fleet. They were massively outnumbered, but their presence sent shockwaves through the attacking formation. HFY's voice cut through the confusion. Now carrying genuine fury, all rebel vessels, withdraw immediately or be classified as enemy combatants. You are protecting a species that represents an existential threat to galactic civilization. Commander Thegmora's response was broadcast on all civilian frequencies. We've been listening to your propaganda for months, Scout, but we've also been watching this battle. These humans aren't monsters, they're parents fighting for their children's lives. There's a difference. The standoff stretched across space as alien crews threw out the extermination. Some ships powered down their weapons, their crews refusing to fire on fellow hegemony vessels. Others began withdrawing from formation entirely, their captains unwilling to participate in what increasingly looked like a war crime. But the majority remained loyal to their orders, and HFY still commanded over 2,000 ships. The Scout's backup command vessel moved to the front of the formation, its weapons trained directly on the human position. Rebel vessels, you have 30 seconds to withdraw. Before we open fire on all targets, HFY transmitted. I will not allow sentiment to override the security of the galaxy. Morton found himself in the surreal position of commanding a multi-species fleet. All vessels. This is Admiral Morton. I don't know why you're here, but we know exactly why we're here, interrupted Captain Zulvex. Some of us have been having doubts about this war from the beginning. Watching you fight, it reminded us what courage actually looks like. But the moment of unity was shattered as HFY's loyalist fleet opened fire. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history, former allies firing on each other, while the battered human ships tried to make sense of their unexpected salvation. The hegemony rebels fought with desperate fury, knowing they were branded traitors by their own species. The frigate Conscience took heavy damage while shielding the human corvette Havoc. Commander Thigmore's final transmission was philosophical. We always wondered what we'd do when faced with genuine moral choice. Now we know. The Conscience died in nuclear fire, but its sacrifice allowed a squadron of vegan fighters to strike at the Loyalist formation's flank. Space filled with the debris of shattered ships and broken alliances. Through it all, HFY's voice continued its relentless propaganda. Observe how the humans corrupt even their allies. This is their true weapon, not their ships or weapons, but their ability to spread chaos and turn civilization against itself. The Scout wasn't entirely wrong. The battle had become a civil war within the hegemony itself, with brother firing on brother in disputes over the morality of species extinction. But as Morton watched alien crews die to protect humanity, he realized something profound had changed. They're not fighting for us, he told his bridge crew. They're fighting for the idea that genocide is wrong, regardless of who the victims are. The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The rebels were outnumbered, but fighting with the fury of converts to a cause. The Loyalists had superior numbers, but were increasingly demoralized by having to fire on their own people. Finally, as both fleets neared exhaustion, a new voice cut through the chaos, one that made every alien in the battle freeze in recognition. All vessels, this is Supreme Admiral HFY of the Hegemony High Command. Immediate ceasefire. All ships will hold position and await further orders. The transmission source was a massive dreadnought that had just emerged from hyperspace, the personal flagship of the Hegemony's Supreme Military Commander. And the voice belonged to someone who shared HFY's name structure, suggesting a close genetic relationship. HFY's image appeared on the main screen, its alien features showing something that might have been fear. Supreme Admiral, I can explain. You will explain nothing, youngling. You have exceeded your authority and initiated a civil war within our own forces. This ends now. The Supreme Commander's dreadnought moved between the opposing fleets, its massive presence forcing both sides to back down. Around it, more Hegemony Command ships began emerging from hyperspace, the real fleet leadership, arriving to restore order to a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. Admiral Morton watched the developing situation with growing amazement. Humanity's desperate last stand had somehow triggered a revolution within the hegemony itself. The question now was whether they would survive to see the outcome. The Supreme Admiral's arrival changed everything. Within hours, the galaxy's most powerful military force was locked in heated debate over the morality of their war against humanity. HFY, stripped of command and facing charges of exceeding authority, watched helplessly as months of carefully constructed propaganda crumbled. You want to know what I learned about humans? Supreme Admiral HFY addressed the assembled fleet commanders, her voice carrying the authority of millennia, not from propaganda feeds or carefully selected atrocities, but from watching them fight today. She gestured toward the two battered human ships, still somehow functional despite impossible odds. I learned that any species willing to die for their children's future is not the real threat to galactic civilization. The real threat is a civilization that would exterminate entire species. Based on the paranoid delusions of a single scout, the words hit like physical blows across the assembled fleets. Alien crews who had been ready to commit genocide hours earlier now faced the uncomfortable reality of what they had almost done. HFY's response was immediate and desperate. Supreme Admiral, I have comprehensive data on human military capabilities, their historical patterns of aggression, their fundamental instability as a species. You have data on their darkest moments, carefully selected to support a predetermined conclusion. HFY interrupted. But did you study their art, their music, their philosophy? Did you examine their capacity for growth, their ability to overcome their own worst impulses? Admiral Morton, listening to this exchange from his damaged bridge, felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. But the Supreme Admiral wasn't finished. Admiral Morton, you and your people have fought magnificently today, but I need you to understand this war began because many species genuinely feared humanity's potential for violence. Today's battle, while demonstrating your courage, also confirmed some of those fears. She was right, and Morton knew it. The deployment of biological weapons, the targeting of escape pods, the systematic abandonment of civilized warfare humanity had shown its darkest face to the galaxy. However, the Supreme Admiral continued, we also witnessed something else. When faced with extinction, your species didn't just fight for survival, you fought for the idea that survival should have meaning. That's not the behavior of monsters. That's the behavior of people who understand that how you fight matters as much as why you fight. The aftermath of the battle became a turning point in galactic history. The hegemony's civil war over the morality of genocide sparked similar debates across dozens of species. Within months, the Galactic Council was restructuring itself around new principles of coexistence and mutual defense. HFY faced trial for war crimes, not for fighting humans, but for the systematic deception that had led to unnecessary deaths on both sides. The Scouts' defense was that it had genuinely believed humanity posed an existential threat. You studied our history, Morton testified at the trial, but you didn't study our growth. Yes, we've done terrible things, but we've also spent centuries learning to be better than our worst impulses. That's not weakness, that's evolution. The Scouts' conviction was inevitable, but its sentence was unexpected: exiled to Earth, to spend the remainder of its natural life studying human civilization not as an enemy, but as a permanent resident. You wanted to understand humanity, the tribunal judge declared. Now you'll have the rest of your life to learn what you missed. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom, it was in the slow, difficult work of rebuilding trust between species. Humanity's colonies, devastated by the war, were rebuilt with assistance from former enemies. The ships that had fought at the Battle of Proxima Centauri, both human and alien, became symbols of the possibility of cooperation across species lines. Captain Reeves of the Corvette Havoc, the only human ship to survive the battle intact, was promoted to admiral and placed in charge of the new interspecies defense force. We're not trying to forget what happened, she explained to the mixed crews under her command. We're trying to make sure it never happens again. Years later, as the last of the war damage was repaired and new alliances solidified, Admiral Morton stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Proxima station. Through the massive windows, he could see ships from dozens of species working together, human vessels alongside former enemies, their crews united by shared purpose. Regrets, asked Captain Voss, now serving as his chief of staff, about the war. Every day, about how we fought it. Morton paused, considering. No, we showed them what we were capable of, both the worst and the best. That's what convinced them we were worth saving. On Earth, in a small apartment overlooking the Pacific Ocean, HFY sat reading human poetry, something it had never done during its original mission. The verses spoke of love, loss, hope, and the endless struggle to find meaning in an indifferent universe. The Scouts still didn't fully understand humans, but after years of living among them, watching their daily struggles and small victories, it had begun to grasp something it had missed during its time as an observer: the difference between studying a species and understanding it. In its final report to the Hegemony Council, a document that would become required reading at military academies across the galaxy, HFY wrote, I was sent to study humanity's capacity for destruction and found it exceeded my worst projections, but I failed to study their capacity for creation, for growth, for choosing to be better than their nature demands. In seeking To prove they were monsters, I proved only my own limitations as an observer of life. The war that had begun with the Scouts' mission to study humanity had ended with the galaxy studying itself, and in that examination, they had found something worth preserving, the possibility that even the most different species could find common ground in their shared struggle to survive and thrive among the stars. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy not by proving they weren't monsters, but by proving that even monsters could choose to be something better. It was a hard-won victory, paid for in blood and sacrifice, but it was a victory that would echo through the ages. In the end, they had sent a scout to study humanity. It had returned as something neither fully alien nor human, a bridge between species, a reminder that understanding was possible even across the vast differences that separated worlds and ways of thinking. The galaxy would never be the same,